What if Snape was Harry Potter's father? Or Harry Snape's father, I suppose. Merlin's beard, that sounds weird. Oh my god, can you imagine if Lily finally picked Severus and they had a child together, but when that child was born, she insisted on giving it James's surname? Snape would be fuming. I mean, there's no reason Lily would actually do that, unless it was like a long prank set up by the Marauders. I've gone off on a tangent already. Let's assume Lily chooses Snape over James, and Lily and Snape have a child, and that child is Harry. Let's take a look at how that changes things in Harry Potter, or Harry Snape. If Lily chose Snape over James, I think we have to assume Snape never goes into his deep obsession with the dark arts. I'm sure he still has an interest in it, but I don't think there's any chance that Lily decides to be with him if he's that far into it. It stands to reason then that Snape would not become a Death Eater. I mean, he'd have no reason to. He feels happy, fulfilled, and he knows that Lily would never go for it. And so I suppose we can also assume that Snape never descends into this cruel, child-torturing, student-hating potions master that we know from the Harry Potter series. So Snape and Lily get together, they leave Hogwarts, they get married, they have a child, that child is Harry, and for all intents and purposes, they're both pretty happy. Meanwhile, the Marauders would be living largely separate lives. I mean, there's a chance they'd become friends with Lily and Snape, but I think that's unlikely. I'd love to think that James would see Lily as more than just a romantic interest, and that even if she turned him down, he'd pursue a valuable platonic friendship with her. But I just don't see that. Also, Snape was sort of their enemy in school, and so I certainly don't see James taking it very well if Lily picked Snape over him. And by extension, I don't see much of a friendship flourishing between Snape and Lily and the Marauders. Therefore, I think it's likely that Remus, Sirius, Peter, and James live largely separate lives to Lily and Snape. Now, I do think the Marauders would be part of the Order of the Phoenix. In fact, we know that they were in the First Wizarding War. The question is, would Lily and Snape join? Now, I'll answer that question in a minute, but first, we need to talk about the prophecy. So there are two major changes when it comes to the prophecy. Number one, Snape isn't a Death Eater, and so he would never have been eavesdropping at the Hog's Head, would never have overheard the prophecy, or part of it, and never relayed that information to Voldemort. But number two, even though Snape didn't hear the prophecy, it was still made to Dumbledore. I suppose the question is, would the prophesized child who's going to take down Voldemort be the version of Harry who was born to Lily and Snape? Because I suppose there's a chance that James has a child with whomever he's dating or marrying in this version of events, and that child could have been the chosen one. Because now I think about it, the link to the Peverell brothers that Harry has comes on James's side, so maybe there's a stronger pull on James's side towards the chosen one. But I suppose for all we know, James isn't having a child. I mean, it's my what-if scenario. I could give him 5 children if I wanted. But this video assumes that Harry, born to Lily and Snape, is just like the Harry in the books as we know him. So let's go ahead and assume he is the chosen one. So without Snape overhearing the prophecy and passing it on to Voldemort, Voldemort has no idea about the prophecy, at least not to begin with. Because of that, there'd be no attack on Lily and Snape as there was on Lily and James, and Harry wouldn't become the boy who lived. And that all sounds great and lovely, except it also means Voldemort's first downfall would never come about. However, even though Voldemort doesn't know about the prophecy, Dumbledore still does. Sybil Trelawney would still have made the prophecy to Dumbledore. Therefore, I think he'd try to recruit Lily and Snape to the Order. He'd want to protect them, and he'd also want to start grooming Harry into becoming the chosen one. But the question is, would Snape join Dumbledore? And I really don't know. On the one hand, we do see a side of Snape, particularly in the Deathly Hallows when his backstory is revealed to us in full, which is brave, in which he ends up doing the right thing eventually. But that's all born out of guilt. The guilt of being responsible for Lily's death, which is a lesson he'd never learn here. But even without learning that lesson, we know he loves Lily. By extension, he'd probably love the child Harry that they had together. And so if Dumbledore told them that Harry was in danger because of the prophecy, I think that might be enough to convince him. Or at least enough to convince Lily, who in turn would convince Snape. So we'd have an interesting dynamic in the Order of the Phoenix at this point. The Marauders are all members, and now Snape, their mortal enemy from school, joins with Lily. And this presents a very interesting opening. Now we all know what a no-good, dirty, rotten, backstabbing, cowardly traitor Peter Pettigrew is. In fact, in The Prisoner of Azkaban, Sirius reveals that Pettigrew had been a spy for Voldemort for a year, even before Lily and James died. So if Snape and Lily were to join the Order of the Phoenix, under fairly mysterious circumstances, and nobody reveals why, because after all, Dumbledore doesn't tell anybody about the prophecy. With all of that secrecy, Pettigrew would know there was something juicy to sink his horrible rat teeth into, and then report it back to Voldemort for major points with the Dark Lord. So, I can well imagine that Peter Pettigrew, disguised as a rat, which remember, neither Snape nor Dumbledore would be aware of. And if Lily didn't end up with James, she wouldn't be aware of it either. So Wormtail could be disguised as a rat and listen in to all of these conversations, eventually hearing one between Snape and Lily about the prophecy. Wormtail would run along like a good little spy and tell that information to Voldemort. But there will be two key differences from how Snape relays the prophecy information to Voldemort in the book series and how Wormtail does it in this scenario. Number one, Wormtail wouldn't actually have heard the prophecy. Therefore, the information he passed to Voldemort would be less concrete and more sort of he said, she said. And number two, unlike Snape, who immediately ran to Dumbledore for help when he found out Voldemort was going to kill Lily, Wormtail would never own up to what he'd done. And that would mean no defenses, no Fidelius charm. Lily, Snape, and Harry would never go into hiding, because nobody would know that they needed to. So, without Dumbledore knowing, Voldemort is hunting Harry. Wormtail would not only have given Voldemort a half-accurate account of the prophecy, but also the location of Lily, Snape, and Harry. And without Dumbledore knowing they were being hunted, he'd never suggest the Fidelius charm to protect them. So I can't help but feel that the place Lily, Snape, and Harry would be most of the time would be Order of the Phoenix headquarters, surrounded by as many Order members as possible, because Dumbledore would want them to be protected, at least as much as he could without drawing suspicion, because he knows about the prophecy. So Voldemort and his Death Eaters would descend upon Order headquarters. Wormtail would have told them exactly where and when to attack, and a battle would break out. So would Voldemort and his forces of evil be enough to take down Dumbledore and the Order of the Phoenix? If we use Pettigrew's words on the First Wizarding War, Voldemort was taking over everywhere. It definitely sounded like Voldemort's side was winning. So if it came to a huge battle between both sides, between Voldemort's forces and Dumbledore's, it kind of sounds like Voldemort would win. So Voldemort fights his way through the Order, and he finds himself face to face with Lily, Snape, and Harry. Now, without Snape as a Death Eater, pleading with Voldemort to spare Lily, Voldemort would never give her the chance to step aside, meaning she cannot willingly sacrifice herself to save Harry. This is just a regular murder incident. Voldemort would fairly effortlessly dispatch of Snape and Lily, and when it came down to it, without the protection of his mother's sacrifice, Harry would be killed by Voldemort. Voldemort would make another Horcrux from that death and ultimately win the war, unless Neville Longbottom was the chosen one. And if that happened, the entire series changes again. And I broke that entire scenario down in this video, which you'll probably want to watch next because you won't believe how it ends.